If I could only eat one thing for the rest of my life, what would it be? Only pick one.
One?
And get it right.
Mac and cheese. You know it's right, yeah.
The air in the courtroom shifted the moment she entered. You could feel it. Attorneys, reporters, and tense family members packed the room. Then, suddenly, a hush fell. It was Teyana Taylor and Iman Shumpert's daughter who stepped up to testify. No cameras, no microphones, just a little girl with a calm face standing in a room full of adults, all waiting to hear what she had to say. People leaned in, breath held. Everyone sensed this was about to change everything. Iman had fought for full custody for months. His legal team had painted Teyana as unstable, overly emotional, distracted by her new relationship, and unfit to provide the structure their daughter needed. But from the moment their child opened her mouth, that carefully crafted narrative began to unravel like a cheap suit in the rain. She didn't speak with anger or fear. She spoke with clarity. Her voice didn't tremble. Her words weren't dramatic. They were calm, honest, and surprisingly powerful. "Mom takes care of me," she said, even when she's sad. That single sentence hit the courtroom like a slap. Lawyers froze mid-scribble. Iman's jaw clenched visibly. Teyana, seated nearby, covered her heart with her hand, visibly fighting back. Tears. This wasn't a performance. It wasn't a media stunt. There were no theatrics, just a child telling her truth. And that truth didn't do Iman any favors. For months, Iman's team had spun a story that Teyana was too erratic to parent, that she wasn't providing a stable home, and that her boyfriend was an unnecessary presence. But here stood their daughter, calmly refuting all of it. And not with accusations, just with facts, just with feelings. Even the court officers, usually emotionless, shifted slightly in their seats, their eyes locked on the child. One attorney later admitted, "I've never seen a room go that quiet that fast." What stood out most was that the girl wasn't trying to destroy her father. She didn't lash out or place blame. Instead, she spoke about how her life felt, what made her feel safe, what made her feel seen. And those small truths carried more weight than any legal document in the building. But what happened next shocked everyone. Just as the room was adjusting to her quiet power, she said something else. "Mom's friend is really nice to me. He makes me feel safe." She didn't say a name. She didn't explain. But everyone in the courtroom knew exactly who she meant. Pierre, the man Teyana had been quietly dating. The same man Iman's lawyers had spent weeks portraying as a negative influence. A ripple moved through the courtroom, not gasps, but a quiet shift. A few people turned to look toward the back of the room where Aaron sat still, silent, not reacting. And somehow, that silence was powerful. He wasn't there in a flashy suit. He wasn't trying to play dad. He didn't speak or gesture. He was just present. And oddly enough, that said more than words ever could. Iman looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Not because his daughter attacked him, she didn't. But because she didn't say the things he expected. Or perhaps the things he needed. He sat frozen, his face pale, his eyes barely blinked. A reporter later tweeted, "Iman looked like a ghost. Like someone who just realized the game changed, and he didn't know the rules anymore." And honestly, that's exactly what happened. The courtroom wasn't supposed to go this way. Iman's team had a strategy, objections ready, arguments lined up. But what they didn't have was control over their daughter's truth. And that truth flipped the script. The moment the child mentioned Aaron, Iman's attorneys jumped up to object. They argued that it was inappropriate for a minor to comment on adult relationships during a custody hearing. The judge paused, looked at them for a long moment, and then shook his head. "The emotional context matters," he said. That ruling was more than procedural, it was a signal. A signal that the court was ready to hear the full truth, even if it made people uncomfortable. From that point on, things got real. The little girl began sharing small but powerful details about her life. No wild accusations, just quiet moments. She talked about her daily routines, the phone calls late at night, and the way her mom checked her homework even when she had been crying. She remembered her mom making pancakes the morning after an argument with Iman. These weren't dramatic stories. They were glimpses of a real life, a life that wasn't perfect, but one filled with effort and love. That meant something. Iman's lawyers started to show signs of stress. They whispered. They shuffled notes. One of them passed Iman a slip of paper, but he didn't even look at it. His eyes stayed locked on his daughter, who was quietly dismantling the very case they had built. Reporters in the gallery typed furiously, trying to capture every word, every shift in tone. This wasn't about which parent had a nicer house or a cleaner public image. This was about the child, and she was making it clear who she trusted when things got hard. The judge leaned forward, clearly listening with deep focus. This wasn't theater. It was rare. It was a child being given space to speak from the heart. When she spoke about overhearing arguments, Iman's legal team objected again, claiming it was traumatic for a child to be involved in adult issues. Again, the judge allowed it, and that led to the most emotional moment of the day. "I don't like it when they fight," she said. "But Mom tells me it's never because of me. It's never because of me." That landed like a punch. The judge nodded. Teyana wiped a tear. Iman sat stiffly, a vein on the side of his neck throbbing. And no one had expected this. Most assumed the child would say a few polite, vague things, that she loved both parents. Then she'd be done. But she stayed. She talked. She opened up in a way that turned the courtroom into something deeply human, less like a battleground and more like pages from a diary being read aloud. And while she never said anything cruel about Iman, she also never painted him as the hero. What she gave the court wasn't evidence. It was truth, her truth. And in the end, that was more powerful than anyone had expected. The absence was loud. It created a silence that Iman's legal team couldn't fill with statements or cross-examinations. Pierre stayed seated the entire time, never saying a word. But people noticed him. When the daughter mentioned how safe she felt around him, his only reaction was a small shift in posture, like someone trying not to cry in public. No theatrics, just quiet presence. By the time the testimony ended, it felt like the courtroom had been turned inside out. The polished strategies and carefully rehearsed arguments had been stripped away, replaced with something raw, uncomfortable, and deeply human. As the judge thanked the young girl for her bravery, the room fell silent again, this time out of respect, not shock. A courtroom sketch leaked before the day even ended. It showed Iman with his face buried in his hands, shoulders hunched, posture collapsed. He looked like a man who'd lost more than just a case. The image quickly went viral. Memes followed within the hour. One read, "When your daughter hits harder than the judge ever could." Another said, "This ain't a legal loss, it's a personal one." But beneath the jokes, something more serious was happening. The internet wasn't mocking a man losing custody. They were responding to something deeper, a moment of reckoning, one that no PR spin or legal strategy could cover up. It wasn't about who looked better on paper. It was about listening to a child and, for once, truly hearing her. Online, support for Teyana and her daughter came fast and strong. Hashtags like #BraveQueen and #ProtectBlackGirls trended within hours. TikToks broke down the testimony like it was part of a true crime documentary. Fans gathered outside the courthouse, holding handmade signs, cheering and offering encouragement. People weren't just rooting for Teyana, they were rallying behind a mother who had been publicly criticized and dragged through the mud for years. A woman accused of being too emotional, too unstable, too complicated to raise her child. But in just a few quiet, powerful sentences, her daughter turned all of that upside down. Inside sources said Teyana's legal team left the courthouse with renewed energy. One of her close friends posted online, "She didn't coach her kid. She listened to her. There's a difference." That message quickly became the dominant narrative. This wasn't manipulation or planning. It was a rare and honest moment of truth. Iman's side didn't handle it well. Some members of his family reportedly called the judge's decision to allow the testimony reckless. Others accused the child of being coached, but there was no proof of that. In fact, the strength of her words came from how unrehearsed they felt. Her voice cracked once. She fidgeted. She looked at her mom for reassurance. It was all real, and that made it even harder to discredit. Legal experts weighed in across morning shows and podcasts the next day. One attorney said, "Children rarely testify, and when they do, it almost never shifts the case. But this time it did." The judge didn't give a ruling immediately. He simply thanked the girl, called her very brave, and said he needed more time to consider everything. But even without a decision, that simple acknowledgement that he saw her, heard her shifted the entire energy of the case. As the crowd outside the courthouse erupted in cheers, Pierre quietly slipped out through a side door. No interviews, no cameras, no spotlight, just a quiet exit that said everything. He had shown up for Teyana without trying to make it about himself. No grandstanding, no flexing, just loyalty. For Teyana, this was never just about custody. It was about being seen as a mother, a protector, a steady hand in the chaos. And in that courtroom, through her daughter's voice, she finally was. Whether or not the ruling goes in her favor, one thing is now crystal clear: Teyana didn't just walk in with